We've been talking about doing such videos for a long time as we've been having our conversations between us in our kitchen, on our couch, talking about all kinds of spiritual issues that we love to talk about. And the other day, when we were talking about the confluence of the big holidays that are coming up, Passover and Easter, we said, wow, we wish we had a camera here. So here we are having the conversation, turn up the camera, having fun with it, and hopefully inspiring some people.
Yeah, and I think it's no surprise that even though we've been talking about it for years, it happened just before those two holidays.
With the surge in the energy of creation that's available right now, that is all around us in the part of the world where we live. Passover comes to offer us a gift to ride this wave, to liberate ourselves. And I would love for you to tell us about it.
The biblical story really is a blueprint for the journey of life. And it's not the journey of the physical body, because what do we care about? A bunch of folks that walked in the desert or had all kinds of events happening to them thousands of years ago. It's really about the journey of the soul of each and every one of us. And in Judaism, it is known that the Old Testament has multiple layers to it, to its meaning. And one of the layers, one of the deep layers, is the journey of the soul, and it's a blueprint. Now, the different episodes, they happen in people's lives, but not necessarily in the same sequence. The whole story of Passover and Easter, really, which they were celebrating Passover, is all about the Exodus. And the Exodus is not a story only of migration, it's a story of the quest for freedom, the freedom of the soul. Pharaoh symbolizes the rule of fear, and fear rules in all of us. Most of humanity today, right now, lives under the rule of fear. When I say rule of fear, a lot of people think of external fear, but it's really internal. It's the fear of lack, it's the fear that I'm not okay, it's the fear of the insecurities, the fear of the pain, facing our pains from the past, facing our inabilities or shortcomings and admitting them and growing from. And instead of doing that, most people live under the belief that then they have to make peace with it. And the story of the Exodus, it says that a lot of the Israelites chose to stay in Egypt because they actually had pretty good life and they're all good. So why do I need freedom if I'm all good? And I hear it, and I know you hear it a lot in our one-on-one sessions. I'm good the way I am. I made peace with my pain. I kind of learned how to live with it. But pain doesn't go away. Even if we suppress it from our conscious mind, it still rules us because it's like termites in a structure. Once there is fear, it affects how we perceive reality, how we interact with everything around us, how we perceive or not opportunities, how we react to threats. Are they real or they imaginary? Are they current or they based on our past? So all those things, this is how fear controls our reality. And what happens really, it narrows our field of vision, mostly our field of opportunities. Opportunities we don't see, opportunities to expand, opportunities to grow, opportunities to evolve, opportunities to feel better about life, to enjoy, to tap into the beauty and joy and happiness that's available. And that is relevant, I think, to everyone I know at some level. And the opportunity right now is the universal energy is available to support us on this if we choose so. So you have to have free will. If we choose to venture on a journey of freedom, towards freedom, and leave our constraints, leave our fears, leave uh, our pains, because fear is always rooted in pain, behind, and heal them and transcend them and venture into a new and expanded and better and happier and more joyful state of being.
What I see here is actually a map for this process,
Exactly.
the map of the soul journey. So we come to the point where our life is we see ourselves in Egypt, our own personalized Egypt. That's our comfort zone. We're fine, we're good, but something awakens us. That's the first moment of awakening, and we realize, wait a second, there's more. I'm only surviving, I'm not thriving. And that's the moment where we get this impulse to leave our Egypt. Now, it's not easy. We have to overcome all our fears. But when we do it and we manage to leave it behind, we give ourselves a chance to evolve into our potential, to not live from fate, but to really move toward the destiny where we can have, a, like you said, a life of expansion, of love, of easy exchange of love, of intimacy, of deep connections with people, of fulfillment. It's really only when we leave Egypt, which is ruled by our fears, by our ego, that we begin to realize that the life that we've been living is only a narrow, manipulated version of the life that is possible for us. It is an invitation at this time of the year, because of the support, the cosmic support available, to dive into those fears, to see what they are, how do they manifest in my life, to follow the crumbs, to get to the root, and to name the fear that is presiding over us, that is ruling us. And that's the rule of the Pharaoh. And to make the decision, the intentional decision to leave these fears behind. The map of the soul journey provided through the story of Passover even takes us a step further to show us how moving with our fear will take us to that place of the greatest potential. Because when the Israelites arrived to the Red Sea and they had to face death either by drowning or by being killed by the Egyptians, it's only when the first person going in was completely submerged in the water that the Red Sea split, and not before. So it's only when we move forward with our fear that the proverbial Red Sea opens up for us and opportunities show up and a new horizon builds for ourselves, which we didn't even know. They didn't know the Red Sea was going to split. And we don't know that our own Red Sea in our own life will split. But it can only happen when we move forward with our fear. It's important at this time to look at those fears so we can move forward with them.
And they knew that the sea will split, but they didn't believe it. So in many cases, we know that something is good for us. We know we need to do something, but we have hard time believing it because we never experience it, because it's outside our comfort zone, because that's not how we do things, and that's what holds us in place. And this is how fear rules us today. We know that we need to quit this job, change the relationship, show up differently, but we kind of tells ourselves all kinds of excuses and stories and convince ourselves just because of fear. Because fear doesn't show up as like, okay, there's a sign, okay, fear is now operating the system and you are a slave. That is not how.
We don't even know that we're ruled by fear.
Exactly. It's subtle. It's inside our logic. It's inside how we see reality. It's embedded in our flow of things that we used to.
And
It's
that's
very,
the
very tricky.
yes, that's the power of the ego.
Yep.
To keep us believing that this is all that's possible. The paradigm of moving out of our limited self into the new horizon of our unlimited self, which I like to call our divine self.
Into our promised land.
Exactly, into the promised land is also offered by Easter. Easter brings us the notion that there is no resurrection without crucifixion. The resurrection is the rebirth. And I want to make clear this, we're not talking about resurrecting or crucifying anybody. We don't need to crucify ourselves. But what we are being called to crucify is our limiting self, our ego. That next stage, which corresponds to the Red Sea crossing in the Passover map, is in the mystical Christianity map, is the encountering of the dark night of the soul. The crucifixion is not an easy process. To crucify your ego, to reveal it, that's the biggest fear of the ego.
Just to
Self,
admit that it exists for most people. That's the biggest step that they get stuck on.
and then once you admit it, you really have to get to know it. And when you start to get to know it, you start to feel the pain of it. And that plunges us into shadow work. Now, Jungian psychology calls it shadow work. The Sufi and Christian mystics call it the dark night of the soul. You call it in your Hero's Journey Guide the shadow valley. These are all terms for the same process that takes us through the dissolution of the ego. Mind you, the ego can never fully dissolve, ever, because the ego is something that we need. It has agency, it's our drive, but we cannot let our ego control us. We have to control our ego. We need to keep it in check. We need to always have an eye on it. And then we can harness the power of the ego for greater good.
Without being a slave to its limitations and fears. I think a lot of people get confused with the word ego, because in many cases it has a very negative connotation. But the ego essentially is the identity, me as me, the I.
The separated self.
Yes, I'm not part of the one, I'm me. I have a unique identity. Now it has a lot of good stuff, good aspects. It has a lot of positive. It's the drive, it's our motivation, it's the part of us that does good in the world, that keeps us safe, that keeps us going, that motivates us to go through this process.
Yes.
So we can't completely annihilate it. What we want is to take the pieces that become completely enslaved to our fears and rule and limit our ability to expand and to get to our promised land, to get to our expressed and realized in full potential. That those parts we want to be.
Yes. To reach the point of living fully from our divine self, from our true self. And this is not a point that we reach and we have arrived. This is an ever evolving, growing place. This never ends, this process. We cannot reach this place of consciousness without going through the process of the shadow work of the dark night of the soul. It is a mandatory stage. And it really comes as a reward for our longing to get there through the mercy of the universe that prepares a set of circumstances for us that are specially tailored for our personality, our temperament, to throw us into what we interpret as agony, but really liberates us from the crazy attachments of our ego, from the narrow views, from the enslavement, from the addictions that even we don't even know we have. And through that process, we are thrown on the other side. Now, there are maps to go through this process. We don't have to get lost 40 years in the desert. We don't have to suffer. We can actually use this and recognize it. It is the gift of the universe to squeeze out of us the greatest potential. And it's only when our little self is moved out that the vastness of divine consciousness can come down. And there is a Sufi mystic called, his name is, give me a second, Al Halaj. I happened to read two sentences that he said, and it really resonated. He says, between me and you, there's only me. Between me and you, God, there's only me. Take away the me, so only you remain. Take away my limited self, so the fullness of my divine potential can be established in me.
Sufi poets knew how to use words.
They come from a place of adoration of the divine. And that's their path. That's their spiritual path of longing for the divine. Their depiction of the dark night of the soul is quite dramatic.
It is quite dramatic. You know, the funny thing is, and you know it as well as I do, this is the biggest U-turn point for most people.
Absolutely. And I love it when my clients get to that point and I can dive into deep shadow work with them.
Yeah, but this is also many of them disappear, run for the hills, and
That's,
some of them never come back. So
yes.
it's scary, it's
But
painful, it's threatening, it's overwhelming, it's all of the above.
yes, there it involves suffering and it has to be. Otherwise, how will we resolve that part of us that is keeping us trapped? I know when I went through a big episode of the dark night of my soul, which lasted 13 months, and I've only really come out of it 4 months ago. it is only when I started to realize that this is for my own good that I was able to bring myself out of it. I started to see how all the circumstances, all the mistakes that I had created were not mistakes, that they were actually supposed to be exactly that way at that time to create the mess that I got myself into. So I could be refined and purified through this process and let go of some of the cages that I was carrying since childhood. And it was, I don't want to say it was worth it, but I'm grateful for the process. I'm grateful for the pain. I'm grateful for the clarity that it gave me because I was able to leave behind parts of me and completely outgrow them. And I wouldn't be who I am today without that pain.
I think it opens the door to the whole conversation about why does pain exist? What's the purpose of pain? Why pain is part of the human experience? You know, there are certain elements that are part of the human experience, some are not. Why couldn't the human experience be just like, you know, sipping margaritas all day long by the pool? Possibly, but pain exists. So what's the purpose of pain? Apart from the safety mechanism that it provides us in, you know, in the lower level of existence. There's a much deeper purpose. Since I already posted, I think, a video about that, we won't get into it, but it's a whole different conversation that I find very interesting.
I'd love to encourage people at this time of the year to truly ride the wave of the energy that is available, this energy of creation that always surges at the beginning of the month of Aries, and to take advantage of the cosmic support, dive in, look at the fears, look at find your fears through the symptoms, and start the shadow work. Start looking at all the aspects in which the ego keeps you entrapped.
This time of the year is the energy of spring, the energy of rejuvenation. There's a new cycle of creation that starts again. And the blooming of the plants is all about something out of nothing, right? Where did the seed come from? It's invisible, it's underground, and all of a sudden there's a beautiful plant coming out. Right? So that's the kind of the energy that supports this process this time of year. You know, the fear, one of the key ways it operates on us and keeps us in our cage is the fear of venturing on a new, the fear of facing the fear of looking at my true self, the fear of looking at the gaps between the stories I tell myself and my reality. And it kind of puts very narrow blinds, and where most people start seeing a little bit of the shadow, the fear goes, you know, to 10 out of 10. And it's like, okay, hold on a second. And that's how it keeps us from reaching our promised land, for living up to our full potential, for really discovering the divine part of living.
Couple that with people's difficulty in imagining what it would be like to live in their divine self. What does that even mean?
Mhm.
It feels such a foreign concept, like something out there reserved for the holy ones. And in truth, as we progress on the spiritual path, we all learn that we are divine, and which is another gift that Jesus came to teach us, to say the divine is in the human, which is relevant to us today.
And it's already there, it already exists. You just need to let it express itself.
By removing everything that is not.
Exactly.
And then you can live from that place. Like you said, you can do things greater than I did,
Exactly.
which is true for us today. So we need to not waste this beautiful biblical story of the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus' life, of the Passover and the Exodus of the Red Sea, as something that happened once upon a time. And let's commemorate it, because we have to have respect for our ancestors.
Tradition.
Yes, because of tradition. But to really see it as something that is happening today in us.
Each and every one of us.
And it's a force inside of us that is pushing us always to next. And when we oppose this force, then issues start to come up in our life.
Mhm.
It is really a call to surrender. really, if that's one of the messages, other than doing your fear work and your shadow work, surrender to the process. Surrender to the difficulty of the shadow work and don't shy away from it. Move through, because after the pains and the agony of the crucifixion, there comes the resurrection into our full divine self. This leaving Egypt, splitting of the Red Sea, crucifixion resurrection paradigm is not only happening to us on an individual level, but also on a collective level. As a humanity, we are being pushed now through the shadow valley to squeeze out of us, to bring out all the shadows so we can be purified, so we can come back to being a humanity that cares for each other, that cares for the earth, that we are stewards of the earth and not owners. To achieve this level of consciousness, we are now going through a dark time. As much as we are fearing annihilation, there's also the hope for the potential of a new humanity, a new type of human to emerge. And this is what the prophecy of the shamans of the high Andes and of the Native American people talks about. They say that we are in the Pachacuti now, which is a term for a time of great turmoil. And it's really, we're going through the sixth mass extinction, the scientists say. And in these times, Mother Earth pushes the evolutionary accelerator so we can quantum jump into a new level of consciousness. This is our opportunity, and the prophecy talks about the birth of a new human called Homo Luminous, which is the one who radiates, the one who radiates from the heart, the one who radiates its being. It's no longer the time of the Homo sapiens, the one who knows, the one who's operated by the limited brain, by the limbic brain.
It's operating by limits.
Because the limbic brain is the predatory brain, the one that sees only separation. If you have, that means I don't have. It's us against them. So the opportunity here to be born as a collective, as humanity to the next level is also available to us.
You know, this is very similar to the Pachacuti prophecy. There's a similar prophecy in Judaism, and it's called the time of Orim Ashrei. This prophecy talks about the end of times. There's going to be a splitting, and part of humanity will perish, and part of humanity will thrive to a whole new level. The difference, the way I understand it, between who's going to go where is the level of consciousness, because the whole biblical story is really about the journey of the soul, which is really the consciousness journey, the consciousness evolution. Because evolution does not happen only over billions of years, it happens within one's lifetime. And there are many models around consciousness and evolution. There's one that I like the most. It's very concise, and Ken Wilber put it together, and it's really 4 stages. It's the omnipotent stage, the baby that thinks the world doesn't exist when it closes its eyes, and when it opens, it's all there. So it's all about me. A lot of the political leaders in these days subscribe to that philosophy. Then there is the tribal consciousness, which is us against them, my neighborhood, my people, my religion, my sports team, my country against them. We're the good, they're the bad, right? And then there is the global consciousness, which is the consciousness we all together. All of humanity is together. And above that, there is a whole different consciousness, which is the cosmic consciousness, which understands that we are part of creation and we are made of exactly the same building blocks as the rocks and the plants and the animals and everything else. And we're one system that has to exist in complete symbiosis. And human beings do not have a priority. Right? Now, the splitting, the way I understand it, will happen between the first two and the last two. And the first two will eventually perish. And we actually, funny enough, we're seeing it with the appearance of AI. Because AI is a level of consciousness that can easily outperform the first two consciousness, which is unfortunately, in today's world, a lot of the leadership. Right? And the second two, the global and the cosmic, those are type of consciousness that operate a lot more from the heart. To survive this splitting, you have to connect to your heart because that is the words that come to me, saving grace. The connection with the heart is what will make people survive the changes in humanity that will happen as a consequence not of global warming, but from the appearance of its own making, the AI and the robots that will follow and everything else. That the AI can totally outperform the omnipotent and the tribal consciousness. Easily, it already does. But operating from the heart is a whole different paradigm. That, funny enough, the most people that program AI and build those tech ventures, they don't have access to that resource. And I can say that as being one like that and doing this transition myself. So this holiday is touching at the crux, not of history, but of every single one's life today and where we are as humanity, the way I perceive it. It's a crossroad. You either stay a slave to your fears and to the past, or you venture to a whole new brave path that is really your soul journey towards your calling, towards your destiny, towards your fully expanded self.
May we all be touched in this season by the flame of resurrection so we can ignite in our soul the potential to reach our divine self, to have the courage to dig deep in so we can find our fears, so we can leave them behind, so we can cross our dark night of the soul and fully learn to live from the heart. Because it's not just for us individually, like you said, to lead a better life, but it's also for the survival of humanity. And if we all do the work, we're all subscribing to a much better future for ourselves and our generations to come.
And may this inspire many people to find their promised land, whatever that is. And I hope they enjoy this conversation and hope we'll do more of those.